Hey everyone! Today we're going to be digging deeper into privacy contracting. In our first season, we addressed privacy contracting basics and covered the many different types of agreements that have privacy considerations. Today, I'd like to walk you through the most negotiated provisions in a data protection agreement, or DPA, which, as many of you know, is the foundational document in any arrangement involving the processing of personal data by third-party vendors or service providers. The DPA is not just a formality, it's where the legal, operational, and risk realities of data protection are hammered out. Welcome back to the Privacy PowerUp series. I'm Cathleen Doyel, Deputy General Counsel at TrustArc. Let's dive into the key areas that consistently require the most attention during negotiations. The first and perhaps most fundamental negotiation centers around scoping. What exactly is being processed, by whom, and why? Several dimensions come into play here. Types of information. Are we talking about general customer data, employee data, health data, or financial data? The sensitivity affects everything from security requirements to breach notification obligations. Volume. A vendor handling terabytes of PII obviously has different risk profile than one managing a few support tickets a month. The nature of the processing. Is the processor merely storing data, or is it actively analyzing or enriching it? The scope of processing informs almost every other provision of the DPA. The relationship of the parties. Are we talking about a controller-processor relationship or a joint controller arrangement? This defines where the responsibilities and liabilities lie. Negotiating scoping details sets the tone and boundaries of the entire agreement, which is why both parties often revisit this section several times throughout the process. Next, we'll discuss limitations on use. Limitations on use are a heavily negotiated area, and for good reason. Article 28.3 of the GDPR mandates that processors act only on documented instructions from the controller. The debate often comes down to should the processor be allowed to use data for broad versus limited purposes? Should we allow future potential use cases, such as machine learning model development or analytics? And here's a key question. What could go wrong with being too specific? Being overly narrow might prevent the processor from adapting to new business needs. Being too vague invites noncompliance or misuse. Striking a balance is essential, and clear language around permissible use, retention, and deletion is key. Next up, subprocessor authorization. Under Article 28.2 of the GDPR, a processor can't bring in a subprocessor without the controller's prior authorization. This leads to two major discussion points. First, specific versus general authorization. Specific authorization gives the controller direct approval rights over each new subprocessor. General authorization often comes with the condition that the controller is notified and has a chance to object. The objection process. If a controller objects, then what? Is there an agreed timeline to resolve the dispute? Can the controller terminate the agreement? This provision reflects the growing concern around vendor chains and maintaining visibility into every party handling your data. Security incident notification. Article 33.2 of the GDPR requires processors to notify controllers of personal data breaches without undue delay. In negotiation, this gets translated into specifics. Controllers often push for fixed timelines, for instance within 24 hours, rather than the vague undue delay. There's also the question of what qualifies as a security incident. Is it limited to confirmed breaches of personal data? Or does it include attempted intrusions or system downtime? Processors may resist strict definitions and timelines, especially if they rely on upstream vendors or subprocessors to report breaches. Security incident remediation. Closely tied to notification is remediation. Once a breach happens, what's next? Common considerations include remediation measures, what steps will be taken, and are they documented? Controller approval. Does the controller have the right to approve or weigh in on the processor's response plan? Point of contact. Both parties should agree on escalation paths and designate contacts for incident updates. The DPA should ensure the controller isn't left in the dark during a crisis, but also shouldn't become a bottleneck to prompt action. Audit rights. Audit rights are required under Article 28(3)H, but they are often heavily negotiated due to operational and cost concerns. Key considerations are third-party reports. Many processors prefer to offer SOC 2 Type 2 or ISO 27001 reports instead of allowing in-person audits. Controllers often accept this provided the reports are current and include the relevant scope. Who pays? On-site audits cost money. Who bears the cost? Timing and frequency. Should audits be limited to once per year or require advance notice? And confidentiality. Non-disclosure agreements must be in place to protect sensitive business information exposed during audits. Finding a middle ground here is crucial, one that gives the controller sufficient assurance without unduly burdening the processor. Indemnity and limitation of liability. Indemnity is not explicitly spelled out in Article 28(3), but Article 28(4) of the GDPR reinforces that if a subprocessor fails in its obligations, the original processor remains liable. Controllers often seek explicit indemnity clauses for breaches of the DPA, non-compliance with data protection laws, and security incidents or third-party claims. Processors usually push back by inserting limitation of liability clauses, capping exposure to a certain amount, typically the value of the contract or a multiple thereof. Negotiating this balance between accountability and risk management is often one of the last and toughest parts of the DPA negotiations. Standard contractual clauses, otherwise known as SCCs. In cross-border data transfers, standard contractual clauses are usually required unless the data is moving to a country with an adequacy decision. Negotiation will focus around optional clauses. Some SCCs offer optional language. What should be included? That's for the parties to decide. Annexes 1 through 3. These require detailed information about the parties, processing activities, and technical and organizational measures. Processors and controllers often disagree on how much detail to include, especially around the TOMs or data flows, fearing legal exposure. Given the post-Schrems II landscape, ensuring the SCCs are correctly filled out and supplemented is no longer optional, it's essential. Data Subject Access Requests, or DSARs. Under Article 28(3)E, processors must assist controllers in responding to DSARs. Here, the friction lies in timing. GDPR gives controllers 1 month to respond. Controllers often expect processors to respond much faster and allow internal processing time. And effort level. What does assistance mean? Simply providing data dumps or supporting with identity verification and redactions? Processors worry about being turned into a back office for DSARs, while controllers want to ensure compliance without undue burden. A well-drafted DPA will clearly outline expectations, timelines, and the method of cooperation. And lastly, technical and organizational measures, otherwise known as TOMs. Finally, we come to TOMs, arguably the backbone of any DPA. Under both Article 28 and 32 of the GDPR, the controller must ensure that processors implement appropriate security measures. Negotiations focus on whose TOMs apply, the controllers, the processors, perhaps both. Level of detail. Some TOMs are generic, others are very specific. Controllers often want more detail, while processors prefer to remain high level. Negotiability. Processors often say, "This is our security framework, take it or leave it," especially if they serve many customers. But high-risk processing activities may warrant customization. Getting this right is not just about compliance, it's about trust. Controllers need assurance that data is protected, while processors need flexibility to manage risk efficiently. So, to sum up, while a DPA may seem like a boilerplate document at first glance, the provisions we've just discussed, scoping, use limitations, subprocessors, security, audit rights, liability, SCCs, DSARs, and TOMs are anything but routine. These are the areas where risk is allocated, responsibility is assigned, and regulatory obligations are operationalized. Whether you're a controller trying to safeguard your data or a processor managing legal exposure, getting these provisions right is key to a successful and compliant data partnership. That's all for this segment of the Privacy PowerUp series. If you haven't already, go back and watch the previous video in this season, Assess the Risk Before It Hits. Next up to help you power up is Sell, Share, or Beware. Thank you.